is going to be about death. And for many of you, that may be a subject that you don't want to talk about, that you're fearful of. And yet death is one of the three constants that we have in life. From the moment that we are born, we know that at some point we're going to die.
Yes.
And I believe that particularly in the Western world these days, that we are protected so much from death. It's become medicalised and very clinical. And, if we'd lived 100 years ago, and it seems amazing to me that it's that close, it would be unlikely that any family would be untouched by death. Women died in childbirth, men, there were lots of industrial accidents, or they went to war and they were killed. Children, if you were less than £5 born, then the chances of your survival were minimal.
Yeah.
And so lots of people worry about dying and worry about the manner in which they're dying.
Yes.
And I believe that for many people, they don't ever live life fully because they are fearful.
Yeah.
And for me, the whole theme of today is around our relationship that we have with living and living life fully, and with death, and our faith around death, our beliefs around death, and how we can, to perhaps today, explore the relationship and how to help ourselves think about making the most of every day, because we never know. Very few of us have a choice about when we're going to die, unless you sadly commit suicide or you're somebody who has an assisted suicide. For most of us, you don't really know what's going to happen to you. And that's probably just as well. But ultimately, I think if you learn from the people whose lives are cut short, that what you learn is to value every single day.
Yes.
Now, I lost my brother. He died very, very suddenly. He was on a cycle ride and just dropped dead. 49, apparently healthy.
Yeah.
And one of the gifts out of that, and it was devastating and still is, but one of the gifts was to really make me think about, how do I spend my life? How am I making the most of my life?
Yeah.
And then before we opened the discussion, last week I went to a funeral on Friday. Friday. The lady whose funeral I went to was over 100.
A good age, definitely.
And had definitely had a life well lived. She had touched other people in a positive way. She was an amazing lady.
Yeah.
And immediately after that funeral, there was the funeral of a young lad in his teens who had drowned in Clacton a couple of weeks ago.
Yes, I heard that on the news, yes.
And the juxtaposition of this lady who'd lived over 100 years and seen so many changes, and this young man who so tragically, his life had been cut short.
Terrible accident,
And for me, it brought very much to the fore, what's life all about? And, is one life more valuable than the other because it was longer? I don't believe so. But how we live our lives and who we touch within our lives is more important, actually, I believe, than the length of life.
Yes.
Now, let me introduce Rachel Davison. Rachel joins me on these chats. And Rachel's written the book, The Point of Me, which actually, one of the big themes of that is death, isn't it? And learning to manage the thought of death, not only for yourself, but other people.
Yes.
Do you want to give people a brief synopsis of the book?
Yes, yeah. It's my first novel, and so I thought I'd start with something easy, which is the subject of death. In fact, I used to, when people say to me, what are you writing about, Rachel? I'd say, if I was in mischievous mode, I'd sort of say death, just to see the look on their face. But the story is about a young man called James, and he has a terminal illness. And the denouement of the story is not that, it's not about whether he will be saved or anything, because we know pretty much from the start that terminal illness is a proper diagnosis. So it's really about how James comes to terms with the fact that he's so young, he doesn't understand why this is happening to him. His family are devastated, obviously, by the news. each one of them has a particular emotional reaction, a reaction that is guided by their own histories and their own experience of death and tragedy in their pasts. James fundamentally feels, or starts the book from the point of thinking he's totally pointless. Hence the book's title, The Point of Me, because that's the arc he's taken on, which is to discover the point of himself. And I think that is the point. I keep saying that is, I think, what the lesson of death teaches us in this manifestation of life. And that's what James has to learn, which is it's not actually about the point of death. That's the most important thing. It's how you approach it and how you approach the point of living that's the most important. Yeah. I mean, for instance, I did consider if when beginning to write the story, if I was going to concentrate on any aspect of his illness. A couple of people have said to me, actually, what's killing him, and there was a part lazy piece for me because I remember thinking, oh, I'm going to have to really research a lot of the illness, and then I thought to myself, actually, do you know what? It doesn't really matter what's killing him. It's the fact that he's approaching death by any means. Yeah. And I didn't want this to be a story about a particular type of cancer or this, that, and the other. I wanted it to be about the fact that he is at a very young age, and that's the sort of tension, facing a transition that all of us will get to. But he is a very young man. It seems more tragic. It seems more tragic when you tell the story of that young man drowned at Clacton. I mean, not just because it was an accident. It seems more tragic that somebody so young has their life taken versus somebody who's lived to the age of 100.
For me, the difference is that somebody who lives to the age of 100, that's very sad. And there are people who are going to hugely miss and grieve that person's passing.
Yes, oh yes.
But it's not a tragedy.
No, because in the consideration of that, is that true? Does the 100-year-old lady, is it a happier transition than a 17-year-old boy? And that's the tension that James is trying to work out, which is all of this, growth and energy and the burgeoning that goes on, to then have it taken away. What is the point of that? And the story is at the point, readers will have to read it and decide for themselves what the takeout is. But it is in learning to accept many things in the story, learning to look deeper into the behaviours of others, learning to acknowledge that you don't know all the story. James is shown, he's taken on 3 very spiritual journeys. And in the second one, he is shown a lot of the history of his family. So and lots of things fall into place about why his father is the way his father is, very controlling, very withdrawn, very darkly shadowed. Why his mother is the way she is, feeling very impotent, full of anxiety, desperate to be the one that is actually dying rather than her precious son. Yeah. Why his sister, who's so young chronologically, but so wise, spookily wise, and he sees that soul view of them. And I'm just trying to sort of say in the story, in our busy human lives, as we're busy getting on with paying bills and stuff, we very rarely stop to really consider the deep aspects of who we sit next to and who we interact with. And we think that a successful life is one of lots of money and lots of property and shiny cars, and that's definitely the Western approach to success. But is it really? Yeah. The first thing you said about that 100-year-old lady was how many lives she touched. Yes. You didn't tell me anything about the big size of her house that she left behind. I mean, any of that, because that's the point. That's about living a life.
And I think that's for now. Thank you, and please do. You find a book on Amazon and all good bookstores. The Point of Me by Rachel Davison. It's a really good read. I can thoroughly recommend it. But I think I'd like to open it out now in terms of what is a life well lived.
Yes.
And for me, a life well lived is one where you positively impact on not only your own life, but on other people.
Yeah.
Where there's this constant growth and development. It doesn't have to be, necessarily big things, but actually that you're prepared to be open to learning. I believe that we are on a spiritual journey, that our life is about learning how to be a better version of who we are.
Yes.
And that people who come into our lives give us that opportunity. And often it's the people who cause us the greatest grief and
yes.
irritation are the ones who give us the greatest opportunity to learn.
Yes.
But I think back to my brother David, and the thing that gave me the greatest solace on the day of his funeral was the number of people who came and said, quite independently, you don't know me, but I just wanted to say your brother did this, or made a difference, or listened to me, or gave me some time, or made a difference.
Yeah.
And that whilst the day was desperately unhappy, what you realised is that his 49 years had been filled.
Yes.
He had grabbed life by the throat.
Yeah.
He enjoyed life. He enjoyed new things. He lived life with gusto.
Yeah.
Sometimes it was messy. He was not a perfect being by any means.
No.
He could be irritating.
Yeah.
He could be all of those things. But actually, what you recognised as you listened to these people, and as I had written, because I gave one of the eulogies, and I looked back over his life, is that this was a life which had purpose, a life where he had wanted to do right.
Yeah.
On his terms, of course, we all do it on our terms.
Yes.
And I think to the number of clients I've had who live a small life because they live a life that is governed by fear, of course, until we start working together. Because fear keeps you small, doesn't it? It keeps you stuck in your comfort zone. It keeps you... if you are fearful of everything, the chances are you're going to be fearful of dying. It's the great unknown, isn't it?
Yes.
Depending on who you talk to, there'll be people who will say, well, I'll see you in the next world, and we'll be reincarnated, and or I'll see you sitting on a fluffy cloud and in heaven. There are people with huge faith, and they have a real sense that this is the world. I'm going to do things in the world that will make it better for my next world. And there are certain faiths where that's much more important than what they do now.
There's a Japanese phrase that is resolute acceptance of death.
Yes.
And the warriors often use it.
Yeah.
And the warriors train, it takes a lifetime to be a skilled Japanese warrior. And the paradox is that they're training for death, to create death, but in the knowledge that in doing so, they can prevent it.
Yes.
Because they can threaten but not do. And also in the resolute acceptance of the concept of a good death, or, this, that they choose to live in the moment better. Because they're not trying to avoid anything. They are progressing with presence of mind in the moment, not worried about that next second where death could come.
I think in the moment is a really pertinent thing, because that's the only thing that we actually have any control over, isn't it?
Yes.
The past is gone. There is nothing you can do about the past except from learn from it. I believe that it's really important that we look at the past to learn from it. Mm-hmm. Regrets, don't do anything. Feeling guilty is just an emotion which says do something differently.
Yes.
What you did isn't in line with your values, do something differently.
Yes.
So the people who spend their time worrying and whittling and being anxious about the past, that's all very good, but it didn't actually change anything.
No.
Until we've got time machines, there is no way of going back and doing something differently. The only thing you can do is to learn from it and then let it go. Forgive yourself, forgive other people.
Yes.
Otherwise that cord keeps you stuck, doesn't it? Keep pulling you back.
Yes, yes.
And then there are people who spend their entire existence worrying about what might happen.
Mm-hmm.
All of us do it at some point.
Yeah, of course.
And of course you've got to plan. Of course you've got to look at the possibilities and do everything you can to avoid difficulty.
Yes.
But having done that, there is no more you can do.
Exactly.
The problem I have is that the balance between looking back and looking forward, and what you spend in terms of appreciating what you have in this moment, is unbalanced.
Yes.
And so busy looking back and looking forward that actually the now gets lost.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, just sitting here, those of you won't know that we're sitting in my garden room, and I have an internal courtyard which is full of summer flowers and greenery at the moment. And it's something that I appreciate every time I look at it. We're sitting here in comfortable surroundings, drinking a cup of tea, having a conversation with all sorts of people, and engaging them in our conversation with the wonders of technology.
Yes.
Now, there are times when technology drives me insane, as you know, but actually I can appreciate its power in the moment that here we are talking to people all over the world that we've never met, and they have the opportunity to share our chat.
Yes. Yeah.
Now, if I was worrying about what I'd just done before, or worrying about what I'm going to do next, that appreciation and my gratitude for those things would be diminished, wouldn't it?
Yeah, if you're in too much of a hurry. And that's the paradox of it, isn't it? That you bring up the subject of death, and you think, and your immediate reaction is one of, dear, how morbid. But in actual fact, when you start talking about death, we are talking about life.
Well, absolutely. And that's the whole point of this conversation, isn't it?
Yeah, because there are beliefs that the point of us being born and dying is just a transition for, our souls are moving into a human experience, and then they move back out of it and onto something else and come back and repeat it and learn the lessons that our souls are trying to do. But some people believe that the point of death is that if you didn't have that knowledge, if you didn't have that sort of everybody knows they're going to die, then would anyone actually get on and live? Or if you just had this unended, limitless, would you actually just, where's the motivation? So it's always, it always amuses me that the universe has to have some balance. That if you are to live,
the yin and yang, the dark and light.
The chaos versus order. That there's always this, and that if you took away the negative side of that, and I put negative in inverted commas really, because I'm not sure that death is a negative. No. You have to consider that as a baby, you're lovely and warm, floating around, there's this lovely heartbeat, the thudding noise, and all of a sudden you're squeezed to bilio and you come out to blinding light, it's cold, and there's, what's this thing called air that you're having to breathe now? And maybe that is a terrible process. Maybe that's why we forget and don't have a memory at first, because it's too traumatic.
Yes.
And then we get on with the process of living and remembering.
Yes.
It's about balance, isn't it?
It is indeed. And I think, if you consider how when we're born and when we're first growing up, the world seems such a friendly place, doesn't it? Everybody loves us, that we are curious, everything is new. I'm fascinated that there comes a point, usually about the age 3 or 4, where suddenly children become aware of that they're not perfect. They start to be aware of other people's opinions. They start to recognise that that not everything is rosy and lovely. And I think for me, it's learning that actually appreciating who you are, wobbly bits and all. And recognising that you have value just because you're you, that you are something that's unique and special, and that you have an amazing body that can do all sorts of things without you having to direct it.
Yeah.
But isn't it interesting that very often people don't appreciate what they've got until there is the threat that it's going to be taken away. So I didn't appreciate being able to walk unaided until I couldn't.
Yeah.
Often there's a health scare where people have a heart attack and they decide life is going to be something that I want to savour and get the best out of. Isn't it sad that you have to have a heart attack before you think about, I'm going to feed myself properly and look after myself properly because I want to live longer?
Yeah.
And that, you know, I've had a number of people in my life who've had very serious or terminal illnesses, and there is a significant sea change the moment you're told you have a finite number of days. Don't know what they are, but you've got an illness, this could potentially kill you, or this is going to kill you.
Yeah.
And then suddenly their attitude towards life shifts and goes into a different gear.
Yeah.
What would life be like if we could live like that?
Yes.
But without the threat, without that,
yes,
that knowing that the days are numbered. Because ultimately, from the moment we're born, we know our days are numbered. We know we're going to die.
Yes.
But there's not that sense of urgency. That's not that sense of, I'm going to wring every opportunity out of this life.
Yeah.
I've spent some time in a hospice, not as a patient, I hasten to add. But the thing that struck me is what amazing living places they are.
Yes.
Where people they're clinging on to every day and making the most. And how often family rifts are healed. And isn't it a shame that they wait until the last moment to say they're sorry or to forgive? If that had happened 10, 20, 30 years before, what a different quality of life those people would have had with those loved ones in their life.
Yeah, because it is only with the limitation pressing against you that you realise the value of what you have. And it is a shame. I mean, I always think of little children as being, so I think of it slightly as the opposite of what perhaps most people would, where I think of those little children as being the most conscious beings on the planet. They are the most connected with their spirituality.
Well, they're certainly living in the moment, aren't they?
They're curious about nature. There's no limits to them.
Yes.
And then, in my terminology, they start to become unconscious. And what I mean by that is they start to have a sense of separation. They start to have a sense of what the psychologists call the id, the me.
Yes.
And that's when they begin to live a truly human life, where they feel separate, they feel unconnected, and then they have to spend a lifetime working to get back at that. So they move back towards consciousness. So it's slightly different to how most people would say, because most people would say that growing up is the process of... But I think that separation is a necessary spiritual aspect of learning the lessons you have to learn in order to be slightly more perfect when you return.
But don't you think it's interesting, if you look at small babies and when you're in view, they see you.
Yes.
And as soon as you go behind the chair or you go under the blanket, you don't exist. They are so living in the moment that there is nothing else.
Yes.
Once they start to recognise that they are an individual, what also comes with that is they start to compare.
Yes.
And I find it quite fascinating that for the vast majority, they compare themselves with others and find themselves wanting.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
There's a very small proportion of people who compare themselves with other people and find themselves superior.
Yeah, on a consistent basis, and I think there's
probably... They're called narcissists.
I was going to say, the psychologists will have given them a label.
Yes. But interestingly, the adults who are caring for those children, in their quite innocently, I don't think their motive is at all to make their kids feel bad or teachers to make their children feel bad. In the words that they use in trying to motivate and enhance that child's living experience, they actually start to make that sense of separation and difference bigger.
Yes.
And I think it's very sad that you find young children, 6 or 7, who are looking on the television and comparing their bodies to those that have been airbrushed, or people who are starving themselves in order to look good on TV, and saying, I'm too fat, or I'm too this, or I'm not enough of that. And I think that's really, really sad. So I suppose my challenge to all of the people who are involved in hearing this is to ask you, death is twitching your ear, all right. How is it you're choosing to live?
Yeah, it's a great Virgil quote, isn't
it certainly is. What are the things that you believe are important in your life, and what are you prepared to fight for? And by fighting, I don't mean in the sense of taking up guns and so on. Quite the opposite. I'm talking about what are the things that you are so clear about are important to you. And I think for many people, the first step is to actually identify what is important to you. They don't even know.
Yeah, and exactly. That can be a lifetime's work, figuring out what your purpose is.
Yes.
Yeah.
But ultimately, recognizing that you are enough as you are.
Yeah.
You have a value. You are important. That you are no more important than other people, but you are as important as other people.
Yes.
And that, what I hope this will do is to spur you to think about the quality of your life. And if it's great, congratulations, wonderful. Please let us know. I'd love to know. Send comments through the website comment box. But also, if there are areas of your life that you want to be better or even better, then what are you going to do about it? Because if you always do what you've always done, you'll always get what you've always got. Nothing's going to change. Making life feel better, making life, enhancing the quality of your life and the life of people around you, you need to take some action.
Yes.
So what I would say to you, there's lots of stuff on the website, genuinely-you.com. But you can also sign up for the free app. Just go to Genuinely You. It's on the Apple Store. And you have access to all of the free resources. There's loads of podcasts and articles. There's a backlog of our radio shows and videos and things like that. Those are all accessible for you to download off your app or through your computer. If you'd like a free digital download of my latest best-selling book, Thriving Not Surviving, The 5 Secret Pathways to Happiness, Success and Fulfillment, you'll find the link on genuinely-you.com. So thank you very much for joining us today. We really do appreciate it. We'd love to know what you think. Let us know what your challenges are. And if there are any things that you'd like us to follow in future programs. So thanks very much for joining us. You take care. Thanks a lot. This is GIna Gardner here from Passionate